First, I want to assure the president that Seattle is fine. I'm not sure what he's so afraid of, and what he's depicting to the nation just isn't true. I spent time in the area today talking to people, listening to their concerns, talking about what brought them there, what they want to see for our city and for community. I don't know why the president is so afraid of democracy. Free speech is part of who we are. It's how we started as a nation. We will be fine in Seattle. We don't need the president's help.
Yeah, man, it's just free speech when people with guns seize an area of a city and say the cops no longer have authority there. Man, yeah, that's what the Seattle mayor, Jenny Durkin, has to say about the CHAZ, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. Well, let's actually hear from somebody who really knows what's going on there, because he was just there. He was inside the CHAZ in Seattle, this little quasi-secessionist anarchist movement. We got Julio Rosas with us now. He is a senior writer at townhall.com. Julio, good to have you on, man. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Buck. I appreciate it.
Okay, tell us. You were there. You were seeing the sights and sounds, and I'm sure the smells, because I remember what it was like at Occupy Wall Street. Tell me about it, man. What's going on in the CHAZ in Seattle?
So the latest development in the CHAZ is actually that there's a growing momentum and a growing consensus to actually rename it to CHOP, which could either stand for the Capitol Hill, which is the neighborhood that it's in, the Capitol Hill Occupied or Occupy protest, so, similar to the Occupy Wall Street.
Wait, they're going to call it Occupy? I said this was going to happen last week. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Look at that. Go ahead.
Or the Capitol Hill organized protest, which, as I can tell you firsthand, it's not very well organized. It's starting to now, just because they've been there for a while. But in the first week that it was CHAZ, it was not very well organized. So part of the reason why they want to rename it from the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone is because, as I've documented and as others have documented, they're not very great at being an autonomous state. They're very much still reliant on the city and the state government. They're still using power and water from the city. They called the fire department to put out a actual dumpster fire that started right outside of the zone because it threatened to set the building that it was right next to on fire. The city has provided porta potties, and they're servicing them. And so naturally they're being made fun of for not being an autonomous state. So that's why they're trying to rebrand.
So they're autonomous, Julio.
Someone made the joke that they're already rewriting history a weekend.
Right. I mean, but they're autonomous in the way that kids who set up a tent in their parents' living room and say no one else allowed are autonomous. You know what I mean? I mean, it's not like they're being allowed to do this, and they can always sneak into the kitchen, so to speak, and get a snack when they want. But I want to know, are they really blocking? Like, do cops not go into this area? Will they prevent law enforcement from entering? Because that's where this starts to feel like some Lord of the Flies craziness.
Yes. So they've declared, like I said, they declared it as a cop-free zone. So on Friday, there was actually some tension because 2 cops were allowed to enter into the zone, and half the crowd wanted to prevent and make sure that nothing happened to them to enter the East Precinct, which is where it's kind of the whole centered around. And the other half of the crowd was very upset because they were saying, well, why are we letting cops in? This is going against everything that we've been fighting for the past 10 days. They shouldn't be allowed inside. And so that kind of caused some division. But generally, yes, cops aren't allowed inside the zone. They are allowing residents because there's like.
But hold on, just once, just because this is important. This is important. Have cops tried to go in? I mean, I just don't understand this. Like if a squad car pulls up, are they saying, nope, you're not, sorry, like you're not going into this zone?
Yeah. A few, some bike patrol officers kind of went to the perimeter of it, and they were met with immediate resistance, and they didn't allow them inside. So the bike cops stayed around for a few minutes, but then they left. So generally, yes, the cops are not allowed inside.
This is amazing. I mean, they've actually then ceded a piece of territory from law enforcement to control to this degree of like anarchic Occupy nonsense. I mean, the city of Seattle is in on this, right? I mean, so tell me what else. Go ahead.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Because one of the protesting is being led by a very socialist councilwoman, Shawant. That's how they gained access to City Hall, because they marched from the zone to City Hall, and she let them in because she has a key to the building, and so that's how they're able to enter and demand the resignation of the Seattle mayor. And so. Absolutely. This is being the city government is taking a appeasement approach to this, and as history tells us, appeasement only works as a short-term solution, and there doesn't seem to be any plans from the city government anytime soon to take back that area. I can't say that the police are working on plans to obviously take, because they didn't want to give up their precinct. This wasn't their decision. But it's just a matter of if the city government will allow them to take it back. And I can say that it doesn't look like the city is going to allow them to take back that area anytime soon.
To the point.
And the protesters aren't planning on leaving anytime soon.
We're speaking to Julio. That's what I want to ask you about. We're speaking to Julio Rosas of townhall.com, who was just in the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. I appreciate you explaining also why they call it Capitol Hill, because that's the neighborhood in Seattle, because it seems like, what does this have to do with what's going on Capitol Hill in D.C.? And I know that people have had that question for a while. But I also need to just get your sense of, Occupy Wall Street, which I covered from the very beginning until the very end, as did a million other journalists. I think there were more journalists than people actually occupying it at the time. But I was there for all of it. And it was clear. I mean, at one point they set up, green military surplus tents. And, they had generators and people were donating stuff. And it was clear they weren't going anywhere for months. Is that what you're seeing with the Capitol Hill Autonomous? And by the way, have they officially changed the name, or is that still underway? Any of both of those questions?
So they're really trying to call it CHOP now. That's what they're really trying to call it now. But I'm still calling it CHAZ because that's how most people still know it as, because it was the first week. They're not planning on leaving anytime soon. I mean, they're even if people aren't planning on staying out there, we have to remember, right? This is a very progressive city. This is a very liberal city. So the neighborhood is generally supportive of this zone occupation, and so they're donating all sorts of food, non-perishable water, toiletry items, tents, clothes. So. From the time that I got there on Tuesday, which is like really the first full day of them getting control of this area, till when I left early Sunday, there's probably about like close to like 80 tents set up, and I know that there's more that have been set because there's a park right next to it, and that's where they're kind of staying. There's some tents inside the zone, like on the street, but they're planning on being there for the long haul, because they're using this as a bargaining chip to have the city defund and dismantle the police department, but that's just the first demand. They really want to use this as a springboard to advance some of their other progressive agendas, like more taxation on Amazon and big corporations in the city, more funding towards social justice programs. So this is they're not going to give it anytime soon, and they're going to stay there as long as the government allows them to stay there.
And I need to ask you, were you, when you were there, did you feel like your safety was an issue at all? Were you telling people you were a journalist, or were you just kind of incognito going around? Yeah,
so I did not identify myself as a journalist, not in the slightest. And the reason for that is because there was a local Fox reporter for the local station. She was mobbed on Monday night. And I can say that the zone is very much operating in a way like North Korea does, in the sense of they are more than happy to show the media all the good side of it, the block party atmosphere and all that, and of course the media is more than happy to run with that. But as soon as fights start breaking out, which happened a lot, or some bad things were happening in the zone, and I started recording that, I was approached multiple times to not record that, and they said they didn't want it on the internet or else it was going to give the zone a bad name. And it's like, well, it's happening right out in the open. Like, this isn't happening in the street. This isn't happening in some like dark secluded room.
And did you see people open carrying firearms as well? Because that was a big part of this. Which I suppose semi-automatic rifles inside city limits in Seattle. I suppose that's legal. Do you know? Is that the case? And then, for example, here in New York, you can have rifles. Yeah. There's guns in the state that you can't have in the city. So I'm assuming the Seattle stuff, those were legal weapons that were being held, at least as far as we know. But are you still seeing people walk around with guns? Because that was not at Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah. Yeah, no. People are there with guns. And the thing that I want to stress here, because it's hard for people that aren't in Seattle to report on accurately, because it's such a loose coalition of groups, and there's so many different types of people there at any given time. The atmosphere is different, literally changes by the hour. So, it can be very peaceful one minute, and then it could be very, very dark the next minute, just because it's such a free-flowing and fluid state in flux. I mean, it's really, really weird. And so, yeah, you'll have some people on the barricades that are armed, and then the next hour there's people there that aren't. It's just this is the best way I can describe it. It's a very fluid situation. There is leadership starting to emerge now, just because they've been there for a while, and now they're starting to recognize, who's kind of in charge. But I mean, they've held that area for almost a week now, and they're just now finally starting to solidify a process to have their voices heard and have people call the shots.
Are they making demands? And then also, do we know if there have been any police calls for serious crimes, for felonies inside the CHOP that have not been answered? But sorry, I'm throwing two questions at you. First, start with the demands, and then tell me about the police calls, because I know the Seattle police commissioner seemed to be saying that this is a problem from her perspective. But start with the demands.
Yes. So there, as I said before, the first and foremost, kind of the common demand that everyone has is the defunding and dismantling of the Seattle Police Department, and that's important because we have, as this whole debate nationwide about what defunding the police actually means, because you have Democrats saying, oh, well, it doesn't actually really mean abolishing the police departments, but I can tell you that the people that are out in the streets, whether it's here in Minneapolis or Los Angeles or Seattle, they are for the complete abolishment of the respective police department. And they have a list of 30 demands, and like I said, it's a wide range of more jobs, more programs, more art programs, things of that nature. In terms of, I'm sorry, what was the other question again?
Oh, just also the Seattle police commissioner, if memory serves, said that she's gotten a bunch of 911 calls from inside the CHOP. Have there been any serious calls that have been unanswered or that the police can't answer because they're not allowed in?
Yes. So I know that there was questions about extortion from local businesses. I didn't see any evidence of that, and I believe actually the Seattle police walked back that the businesses were being extorted. But however, one of the station, I believe it was the precinct chief, was telling protesters when they went inside into the East Precinct that their 911 response to that area had increased by 15 minutes because the streets are blocked off.
That's right, yeah.
And obviously they're not allowed inside. Generally, they're not allowed to come in full force. So from what I could, and from last night, there was another incident where there was a local business that was accused of holding someone at gunpoint, and obviously police weren't allowed to respond to that because there was other people from the zone with guns trying to figure out. They were trying to self-police, and they were trying to investigate what went down. And as you can tell, obviously, it didn't turn out too well. It wasn't a really clean investigation.
Julio Rosas, everybody, doing great work over at townhall.com. Check him out there. Follow him on social media. Julio, great stuff, man. Be careful out there, okay? And come back and tell us if you go in again. Let us know what the CHOP is up to.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.